G'day guys, ZiggyD here. Now while Path of Exile is my main game and action RPG of choice by a huge margin these days, special credit needs to be given to Crate, the indie development team who made Grim Dawn, currently one of the best standalone offline action RPGs on the market, and my number one choice for PoE downtime loot grinding shenanigans. And it's on sale for $10 on Chrono today, so let's take a look at it again. Grim Dawn started out just as a spiritual successor to the old school action RPG Titan Quest, which never got an actual follow-up, but had a bit of a cult following. And early in its development, it was little more than a Titan Quest reskin in my opinion. When I first played it in early access, I actually didn't like it that much. But over the course of development, this game really came into its own. In my PoE downtime, I constantly revisited the game throughout its development, sinking almost 150 hours into the game pre-release. And as I mentioned, honestly, I wasn't a big fan at first, but every update it got better and better, adding features, fleshing out mechanics, polishing gameplay, and now, sometime after its official release, it's really come into its own as a deep, satisfying game. A lot of people think the Torchlight series when it comes to standalone alternatives to PoE and D3, but in my opinion this game is way better than them. It's far deeper and has a really rich loot system. It's also got an expansion penned for Q3 this year, so the game continues to grow. So what is it I actually like about Grim Dawn? On first impressions, it looks a little dated. You'd be forgiven for thinking that. And indeed, it is built upon a heavily modified version of the Titan Quest engine, an 11-year-old game. Graphically, it's not as modern looking as PoE, D3, or even games like Torchlight. However, I do think it's a beautiful game in its own right. It's gritty, dark, and features a full 3D handcrafted world with full camera rotation, which is usually kind of a gimmick in games like this, I think, but it works pretty well here. The thing that really gets me is the feeling of atmosphere and exploration Grim Dawn has. With the camera rotation, you can explore nooks and crannies of ruined houses and hidden caves for additional treasures. I can think of no other action RPG that really rewarded exploration quite like Grim Dawn does. There are tons of hidden loot caches, some with actual unique items set in them that you can find, dungeons that aren't on the map, and even quests that you could easily miss had you not explored. While random generation does play a role like in all action RPGs in terms of which monsters you'll face and sometimes which paths will be blocked or accessible, but in Grim Dawn the devs have gone for a much more handcrafted preset system of zones, which results in a much more detailed world than what we're used to seeing in these types of games. While it does mean there's a bit less variety in like replaythroughs of the game, overall there's a lot more kind of detail to the game world. The next thing that really gets me about Grim Dawn is the gearing system. It's extremely deep and flexible. While it does suffer from some stat bloat, there's like 10 plus different resistances for example, finding good gear in this game is immensely satisfying and impactful. My analysis is that it comes down to a few key mechanics. Firstly, the gear system includes skills, actual skills that are not available to either your chosen classes or sometimes to any class at all, they're completely unique to items. Components that you socket into your gear can give you active skills to supplement or even sometimes define your build. Items can also come with unique abilities or procced abilities, such as a chance to shoot a fireball on attack for example. As you progress, stacking these to supplement your build can result in very different characters even if they have the same skill trees. There's tons of variety in drops, you can craft items, you can craft components to enhance those items, you can hunt unique and set items, some that are random, and some that are specific drops. And probably the coolest thing is the monster loot system, which is a holdover from Titan Quest actually, I believe, where monsters will sometimes actually wield the powerful items that they drop. So if you see an enemy with a shiny sword, they'll probably drop it when you kill them. Though this can be a little brutal in cases where you run into an enemy with something like a mana drain weapon that saps all of your mana when it hits you. The game's definitely got that feeling of wanting to alter or make a new build to use some of the loot that drops for you, which is a great thing for longevity, especially if you're an altaholic. The character build system outside of loot is pretty deep and flexible too. You can pick up to 2 masteries to combine together into your class, and you can take whatever skills from each mastery you'd like to make your build. For example, Demolitionist plus Occultist equals a Pyromancer, Soldier plus Arcanist equals Battle Mage, and so on. Then there's also the massive Devotion tree, which reminds me of PoE's skill tree because when you first open it, it's a bit overwhelming. You gotta take a bit of time in here to kind of like see what all these devotions do and plan out kind of where you're gonna go with your build and which actually help you and which don't. You unlock points to spend on the constellations in this devotion tree by activating shrines hidden about the world, which again further rewards that exploration I mentioned earlier. Constellations provide a mixture of passive stats that scale damage, defenses, or utility, and then there are actual proc skills in the system as well that you bind to your actual main character skills to enhance them, somewhat like Path of Exile's support gem system actually. For example, on my Gunslinger Pyromancer, Flame Torrent from the Devotion tree is bound to my main skill Fire Strike and gives a 25% chance to create swirling flames that deal fire, chaos, and burning damage, which is perfect for my build. A fun feature that sets Grim Dawn apart a bit and doesn't exist in things like Path of Exile and Diablo 3 is the Crucible mode, which is through a DLC, and that was released fairly recently, I believe. I've only played a little bit of it so far, but basically you fight 10 waves of enemies and then a boss, and then at the end you have the option of continuing on for another harder 10 waves of enemies to kind of like up your rewards, or you can claim the loot that you've earned so far. As I've said, I've only played a little bit of this so far, but it seems like a pretty fun way to farm loot. I've talked a lot about what I love about Grim Dawn, but the game's definitely not perfect. My greatest criticism is probably that quite a few of the skills are quite clunky to play. There's a fair bit of name-locking melee action going on, and some of the skills just don't feel good for some reason. They don't have like much impact to them, for example. Thankfully, in Grim Dawn, respeccing is pretty easy, so you can try skills to see what you like, and then you can respec to optimize your build. Also, the proc system from gear and devotions can sometimes turn a lackluster skill that doesn't feel very impressive at the start into a great feeling one. For example, on my Gunslinger again, a simple fire-themed gunshot ability, which is pretty meh at the start, can get quite satisfying when it's also spawning waves of fire, additional projectiles, and explosive shrapnel. Though this can actually take some time to get to and some investment in terms of gear and farming to get to that actual point. Like with most deeper action RPGs, the game starts out a bit slower and then ramps up slowly as you unlock more of those mechanics and get more of that interesting gear to supplement your build and turn those less interesting skills and builds into more interesting ones. One final thing I wanted to mention is that this game has an offline single player mode and is moddable, for better and for worse. There are a number of mods and tools already available to help customize your experience, which for some people is great. However, this means that the community aspect of the game is far less present than in, say, Path of Exile. If you're going to be grouping, you're most likely going to be playing with friends, or else you run the risk of pugging with people that have simply modded their choice of items into the game, for example. Trading communities exist, I hear, but they run into the same problems where people could just cheat their items to trade with. If you have a couple of friends to play and trade with, though, you're probably going to have a blast with this game. And of course, the game is completely fine solo as well. Trading or grouping is not mandatory, it's just often more fun, as with all games. Overall, Grim Dawn has a ton to offer enthusiasts of deep action RPGs. It's not super casual friendly, but for PoE fans, it's a natural choice of side game. It's not the most modern looking choice on the market, but if you like min-maxing, optimizing, and farming awesome loot, then definitely give it a try. And again, if you're watching this video the day that I release it, there's currently a 24-hour flash sale for $10 on Grim Dawn on chrono.gg, which you guys have probably seen me work with in the past. They've done deals with Path of Exile and stuff in the past, and they're basically a site that works directly with indie game companies to promote their games through these daily sales. It's not like a third-party key reseller like G2A or anything like that. If you use my affiliate link in the description, I'll also get a cut of the sale, so I appreciate it. That's it for now. I'm ZiggyD, and thanks for watching.
That skill's not ready.